Okay, thanks for joining back. Okay. Now, so the way, however, you have assigning the values from these parameters, the same way it will be storing the values in that. Okay, so I'm going to take the roll number, integer roll number. So, okay, sorry, I'm going to use this or number and then age and then string address. If you observe, previously I have a for these two variables, I'm having a the name in this class and the name that I passed having a different values, so I don't have any issue. When I'm having a same name, what will happen? Whether it will allow or not allow, or what will happen? Let's see. There's a way that we can only assign to this class variable. There is a way to assign it. So before I will telling that, let's see what will happen if I use as it is, like student name and then followed by the roll number and then I have a age and then address. So hope everyone can hear me and see my screen. Okay. So here now I have all the four values I'm passing as a parameter in the constructor. Okay. Let's see. So, but the only thing I'm doing was I'm using the same variable names in my parameter names also. I'm using the same names. So let's see what will happen. So I have a roll number and then followed by age and followed by address. So let's see what will happen. See, it is not get assigning to a class variable. Why it is not assigned? First, you have to understand. So, so what we call here was, so we are declaring this variable as well here, right? We are having a string type and we're having a variable. These are called as a local variables, which having the life within this method or within this constructor only. They having a life for these variables what you have declared in the level of a method or a constructor. So these are called local variable. And when you having these public variables of the class, even though these are having a scope across all the things in your class, they are having a scope in this constructor, this, if you have other methods you have written also, there also it is having a scope. But these variables are having a scope as a local. So when you having public variables and local variables with the same names, the priority was given to the local variables only, because again, when the memory was allocated. So when you have created a class, it has been there, and when you have created an instance, the new instance object itself, you having this variable, and then next when you're using a constructor, again the second time you are using this one. So this is going to be a latest. Local variables are the most latest variables being created in your memory, so that will be used as a priority until unless if you're not mention anything. So how we can override this? So still I want to use the same name. Still I want to assign this local parameter to a local variable value to my public variable. How I can utilize? So how I can refer this class variable with the same name is, you can use a keyword called this keyword. So this keyword will help you to access the class variable whichever class you are, the same variable you can access using the keyword called this variable. Okay, so it's not say yeah, it's saved now. If I'm trying to execute now, now I should be able to see all this other two variables also getting assigned to my class variables. See here. So that is a variable called a keyword called this we'll use when we having a same names being used. Okay, I think so far it is clear. Now I will explain a concept called a wrapper class. Wrapper class means um, again the wrapper class was nothing but the same as this class, but um, why? Because this class we can treat it as a wrapper class only. Why? Because it's not having any methods and all. Even though you have methods also doesn't matter, but wrapper class means all you're going to use that class as a custom data type or a custom data structure, where your aim was to bundle some variables together as a data structure by using a class. Those classes we call them as a wrapper classes. Okay. So I'm saying this is a wrapper class, right? So let's say I'm going to um, create a one more class and use this class as a data structure only in the other class. Let's see how it will be used. File new. I'm going to create a new class. The class called mm, class, school info. Let's say or like uh, functions. Let's say. Give me a second. Here, what we're trying to do was the school function is again a class I'm having. So in this class, I'm going to have a um, school name I'm having, and I'm having address of the school. And here, I'm going to have the student info. There are like number of students in my school. So I'm going to have a array of that like the array of the student, how many number of students I'm having. I have an array of it. So these are my structure I'm going to use here. Okay, so I have to define it, right? Array of students. So I have a school name, address, and a students. Now, what I'm using here, I'm using the student info as one of the data structure, and I can call it as a wrapper class as well. So it's having its own constructor and the data structure I'm using for this class. Okay, and now um, how I going to use the school functions? Okay, now I'm having a method two. What I can write. I'm not having. I have a constructor for this class. Let's say I have a public schools constructor. So here I'm going to pass the school name, and then I'm going to pass the address, and here what is going to be address and have school name. Okay, this two I'm going to pass, and I want to add mm, two students in the constructor itself. That is my student s1 equal to student so I'm going to use the same constructor as this one. This is one as my student, and then I have a second student, so I have to use a different name. So I have two student information. So what I'm going to use, I'm trying to, this is way to add. So adding the one value to the array, so I can, so we can go detail how to add this list and adding the variables to the list. We can discuss further, but for now I am going to use it. So this is used to add a single variable to a array. This is a method called add. Okay, so now I want to define a school. So instead of plural, I want to use a singular value so that it will be more meaningful. And then in this, I'm going to public. I don't have any written value for this method, and this method is going to do print my school info. That's what I'm going to do here in this method. So what I'm going to do, just I want to see how the school information is being information. I'm going to print this one. This um, school name is school name only, and followed by the address. Students. I'm going to print the students. Okay, I'm done. So this class is having one constructor and set of variables, and then it's having a methods. So I'm going to utilize this in my anonymous window. Okay, so I have this class sf1. So I have two parameters that I can pass. One is school name. So let's say some school name, and then address is somewhat going to just use it. So I don't want to execute all this. I want to execute only this piece of line. So I will select it and I will use a execute highlighter. Okay, it's saying a null pointer exception in the line number 30. Okay. Here. So here we are trying to add to this array, but we have not initially we have declared this variable as an array, but we have not initialized. So it is not a primitive data type, right? So it need a initialization. So how I can initialize here? Here I want to initialize it. Um, Students equal to, I guess I have to initialize. Okay. So and save it. So I'm not going to mention any size here, and I was just trying to initialize some space and had to mention there's two ways. Either I can directly add the values here or I can add the size. For now, I'm just giving some size and declaring the space over here. And I'm trying, so it got saved here. So I'm giving the size as 2, the array, and I'm initializing and I'm trying to execute the highlighted here. Okay, it got executed and I was able to see the value. Okay, so I don't have any debugs here. So there's no debugs as printed. So what I'm going to do was once it is initialized, so I have a method to print the values, right? So I'm going to call that method um, print my school info. If I use this method and if I execute these 2 lines, let's see what will happen. Okay, I'm using a debug only. So here, if you see, um, okay, there it is. So here, what happened was, so I given a size as a 2 here, and then, so the 2 sizes, I'm not using these 2 sizes, and I was adding on top of it new values. So what happened? So first value is null, second value is null because I am not using it. And the third value, I have this information till this comma, and the fourth value, I have this. So instead of that, I want to utilize this 1 and 2. Then how I can utilize this? There's an option of, so this concept are all it's going to cover in the array topics. So I don't want to discuss again here, not confuse you. Mm, no, no, sorry, has to be array and then sorry. Again, there is a concept called indexing, but let me cover that for you. Okay, so even though the size is 2 that I have given, but how I can access the 2 memory spaces first, whenever the memory space is created, the index is used to start with the first space is going to be a 0. So here we are trying to access those spaces using an index. So we will be having the first one as 0 and second one is followed by 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if the size is 5, you're going to have indexes till the before number. That is because it's starting from the 0. So you will be having the index one number less than that. So if we had is 2, the spaces, index spaces are 0 and 1. So this is how we can use it. So let's say if I execute the same code again, what I executed before. So now I don't have that null values. My expectation was, let's see. See here, now we don't have null values. This is a before log where we see the null values and then followed by the values. Where in this log, we don't have null spaces. Whatever declared before, the same spaces we are using to store the student information. So this is what I was trying to explain for today, and a small topic I want to cover that as well. So any questions so far before I'm jumping to the next topic? Okay, I will take it as no questions. Now, I'm going to explain the different types of sandboxes. I think I have already given us some quick introduction about the sandboxes. If not, let's have it again. So sandbox is nothing but a development environment of your production instance. Let's say when you are doing development, or like when you have already a production org. So first of all, understand what is a production environment and a development environment. So when we saying environment, that means whatever the org that you are logging in, all that org it means. So we have a developer org, right? So this is all it called as a developer environment itself. But when we having a actual prod instance, there we not develop where the actual users are being used. That means, let's say you have developed one application using your point and click, and there are 100 users who are using your application, and at some point they ask some changes to it. So they have some blah 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 changes and they ask to do it. So if you're trying to do it on the same org, if something went wrong or not working as expected and you still not completed your changes, the meantime what will happen, the actual users will impacted with that changes, right? So you should not disturb the existing business, and you have to build in a separate environment, which is again, if you already built, right, so wherever you're trying to try your new changes, you should have all these changes what you're having in your production environment. Then only you can make the changes easily. Otherwise, whatever there in your org, you have to build that, and on top of it again you have to do your new enhancements. So there is an option called sandboxes. So when you are in your production org, there you have option to create your development environments. Like while creating your development environments, there are different types of environments that you can create. So that environment, what we call it in the Salesforce, we call it as a sandboxes. There are different sandboxes we can create from the production, or those are 4 types, and I'm going to discuss those here. So I'm going to use the same image so that it will be easy to explain. So while creating a sandbox, what are the things and how often we can create those sandboxes? Can you see anything? Okay. Meanwhile, it get open. I will explain you. Yeah. So now first you understand what's the production environment and development environment. In development environment, we have different types of sandboxes. Um, those are four. One is a full copy sandbox, and next is a partial copy sandbox. Next is a developer pro sandbox. Next one is a developer sandbox. Okay. Now here, what is the difference? Why we have four types of sandboxes? Okay. First thing was, so when you having already built in your org, and on top of it, you're trying to do enhancements. So what are the possible things on running business? What are the things that you will be has to copy to your development environment? There are different things that you have to copy, which are some of them are essential, some of them are not essential for developing. So what are those? Open with good. So here you see developer, developer pro, partial data, and full box. So if you see the things here, which includes or like what it includes over here is a configuration. So what we see here is configuration, apex and metadata, the users and the records, and if you have a template or not, and then history and the chatter data. First of all, we'll understand what are all this means. When we saying a configuration, what it mean by a configuration? Because when you're having a production edition, you're having the features, right? Like it could be unlimited edition you might be taking, or enterprise edition, and what are all the features that Salesforce is providing, everything, and there will be how many licenses you're having, all the configurational information that you're having, and there's a configuration, and then apex and a metadata. So first of all, apex, you know, right? All kind of all this development stuff, apex classes, visual force, everything, it will include the custom coding. And the metadata, what it means, the metadata was, so you might have created some s objects, fields, layouts, everything that you do point and click is going to be whatever the data model it is, we call the data about your um or your all your point and click about the data is the metadata, what we call. If in simple terms, if you want to understand what are all things that we do using the point and click and out of box features, all your data model, like your custom objects, fields and everything, we call it as a metadata. Apex and metadata, that's also you want to copy, and the user information. Let's say there will be 100 users configured in your production, or so in the development also you should have that all users, then only like if the changes are specific to some group of user, then only you can test. So you need all users also to your development environment, and there will be some record information that will be stored in your production, right? So you want to copy again the same copy of data also, you can copy, that's the record information. And there's a concept called a template. So in the template, we have option to select which objects data you want. Let's say you don't want all the object, there might be some data which is sensitive to the data, so it should not be exposed to the all development team. It should be still hidden to the all the developers, and it is sensitive data, we cannot expose the data, so we can exclude the data information by using a templates, where the templates we have an option to which objects data you want to copy, and where which duration also we can have an option, and history and chatter data. So history and charter means, history means when you're having a field tracking history enable, let's say if you're having one field and you enable that as a trackable, and when it is a trackable information, you will be having history of it. When it has been changed from old value to a new value, and who has been changed, when has been changed. So this is all history. There will be like a lakhs of record when you're having some record, and so many people are coming and changing that information. You having a huge information, the possibly the huge information will be there on the history. And charter feed also, there is a possible way that's going to be why, because when they start communicating, we don't even imagine how much of data it's being accumulated in the chatter. So again, it's optional whether you want to copy that information or not. Okay, so these are all what we will be having in a production that we can copy to your sandbox. Now, why? What are the different types of sandboxes and how it differ? First, we'll understand. So basically, we have four types of sandboxes: full, partial, developer pro, and developer. So the main thing here was how often we can refresh the data. When I'm saying a refresh, what it mean by refresh is, refresh means it will create a new copy of your development environment or a new copy of your sandbox using the production data, whatever there in the production. So what all I call it, right? It will be copying from the production and creating your new sandbox. So if you already created sandbox and if you want to refresh it, that means again it will delete everything in your sandbox and it will take a fresh copy of your production, and again keeps your things ready in your sandbox. That means a refresh. Okay, how often we can refresh based on sandbox type? We have a different refresh interval. That is, full box means it's having exact copy of your production. That's why there is a more interval, that is 29 days. You can refresh the full box sandbox once in a 29 days. You can once you have refreshed the full copy sandbox, you can again refresh after 29 days only. Before, you don't have option to refresh it. But the thing was, it it will be exactly same as your production. Or if you take in terms of capacity means the data storage or a file storage, it will be say exactly same as your production org. And you see all this information, you can to copy from your production to your full sandbox. Whereas the partial box, you have the refresh interval of 5 days. Why? Because we don't have an exact copy of a production, where we have a limitation, that is you can copy only configuration, apex and metadata and user information and some part of the records, not exactly all the records, only few. So there's a limit. So to that limit only you can copy the records from each object, and there you have to follow the template, because we have a less data, and it's not exact copy. So you have to mention which objects you want the data that need to be copied from production to the sandbox. So you have to mention in your template what are all the objects you need and how much data you need. Everything you have to mention in your sandbox template, and you have to choose the template while refreshing the partial sandbox or creating a partial sandbox. And the capacity is a 5 GB for the partial data. So, and the refresh interval is 5 days. So all the data that you can select here, it has to a maximum 5 GB, whichever is within the limit, it will take that as. So if all the data it's coming as 1 GB only, then it will be within 5 GB only, right? So it will copy only to the that information only. If all data is coming around 20 GB, and then it will copy the data up to 5 GB only. Above that, it cannot hold that information. Okay. So the interval is 5 days. So once you created a partial sandbox, you can refresh after 5 days only. So you have a more interval rate, and again you have a less data. So you don't have option to copy the history and chatter feed information using the partial data sandbox. And then coming to a developer pro, so you have in refresh interval for every day. If you refresh today, again tomorrow also you can go and refresh it, and you have a capacity of 1 GB file storage and 1 GB data storage. And you can copy only the configuration effects and metadata, all users only you can copy. All this 1 GB is going to be a empty space that is going to provide. You can create your own test data, and what you can do is you can use the data loader to load the data from production to your developer pro sandbox. And you have a refresh interval of every day and developer sandbox. So it is exactly same. The only difference is the capacity that you have 1 GB and 200 MB. And if you look at the size was the number of sandboxes that provided for developer pro or less compared to a developer. So usually by default you will get 25 developer sandboxes in any org, and you will get based on your edition, you will get developer pro or develop a partial copy or a full copy. So you have to pay extra based on how many sandboxes you wanted in full copy, partial copy, or developer pro. By default you will get a 25 developer sandboxes and one developer pro sandbox. And based on the higher sandboxes you want, by because it's going to be exactly same copy or more capacity, right? So you're going to be pay extra if you want any additional sandboxes or a full copy or partial copy sandboxes. So in simple term, you're going to have all the sandboxes. Then what is the purpose of having these many sandboxes? So you have a limitation, right? Where you're using a developer sandbox, you're not having a exact production data. So you can test all the functionalities, whatever there in the production. You can have all the features, but you're not having the data there. So some of the issues in the existing org mostly dependent on the data that you're having in the production. So only until unless you have data, you cannot identify those issues and fix those issues. But if it's anything functional and features that you're going to develop, the developer pro box is good. And when we have more developers, so to not like step on each other, you can have your own sandboxes, and you can do implement your features, and then you can merge those changes in uh, a higher version of, or like a next level of your environment where you do actually testing. You will merge all those individual developer changes to the testing environment, like developer pro or a partial data or full copy. You will merge all changes to a one sandbox, and there usually we do testing and then have actual data, so the testing team can take care of the testing. Once it is ready, then it will be moved to a production. So where in the full copy and partial copy sandbox, we can do a load testing, and actual data testing can happen in the partial and full copy sandboxes, where the unit testing can be done in the developer and developer pro sandboxes. So hope we are good. Please, if you have any questions, please to ask. Otherwise, same time, we'll meet tomorrow.